when it comes to their global initiative and foundation.
And finally, a proposition on the Texas Republican primary ballot deals with Sharia law. Robert Thornton explains.
Early voting in the Texas primary is underway ahead of next week's March 3rd election day. There are 10 propositions on the Republican ballot. Proposition 10 says the state should prohibit Sharia law. Washington Watch program host Tony Perkins said that unlike Judaism and Christianity, Islam is a political and legal system all rolled into one, and Sharia law is part of it. Frank Gaffney, president for Institute for the American Future, made these comments on Washington Watch.
Islamists, some call them, I think of them as Sharia supremacists, are very clear about this, Tony. They say that Islam is not a religion, that it is instead a complete way of life, I believe, political ideology at best, and at worst, a diabolical death cult.
Gaffney said Sharia law is about power and talked about the goal of the proposition in Texas.
The practical effect of this Proposition 10 is arguably the most important single measure being voted on in the course of this primary, that's for sure, and maybe across the country, because it offers the people an opportunity to say, I don't want to go that way. I do not want our country's various states to submit to Sharia, and they shouldn't either.
I'm Robert Thornton.
There's more news available online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Hey, I'm curious. Would you help AFA continue to stand in the gap for future generations of our families? You know, we rely on the generous gifts of people like you, and you can help keep the mission of AFA going strong well into the future with planned giving through the AFA Foundation. If you have questions, we can answer them and then help you set up a charitable gift annuity or a bequest. You'll leave a legacy that will impact your grandkids and beyond. Visit afafoundation.net to find out more.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Welcome to Jenna Ellis in the morning. This is Ryan Helfenbein. I'm guest hosting today. I'm Vice President of Communications and Public Engagement at Liberty University, and of course the founding Executive Director of the Standing for Freedom Center, also at Liberty University. And it's my privilege to host this morning. I am reminded this morning of a passage right out of Galatians. Galatians is such a critical book in the Bible. It's a book that shaped Europe. It's a book that has shaped the church for over the past 500 years. And certainly it's a book that without which we would not have the United States of America. We're a Protestant nation. This is where so many of our liberties come from. And we recognize that ultimately we're saved by grace through faith in none other than Jesus Christ and Christ alone. In Galatians chapter 1, beginning in verse 6, Paul is admonishing the Galatian church, saying, I am amazed at how quickly you are deserting the one who called you by the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is not even a gospel. Evidently, some people are troubling you and trying to distort the gospel of Christ. And he says in verse 8, but even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be under a curse. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be under a curse. We live in an age where there are many false gospels in the world. There are many antichrists in the world, those that are pointing to other things, other kinds of revelations. Some of the oldest stuff, coming all the way back from the 5th and 6th century, is now cropping up all over the United States, and that is the rise of Islam. And we need to talk about that in the first segment this morning. Texas primary is next Tuesday, and there is Proposition 10. It is going to be on the ballot. Many who are voting are going to consider this proposition, and we need to discuss it in this segment. And I've invited on as guest host of the Economic War Room and Pirate Money Radio. He is also a fellow Texan, and that is Kevin Freeman. Kevin, welcome this morning. Good to have you on. Jenna, Ellis in the morning.
Oh, good morning, Ryan. Good to be with you.
Well, I'm very concerned, and I think many of the listeners are, about the rise of Islam in the United States. And one of the things that I think probably many people didn't know, I certainly didn't know this until just maybe a few short weeks ago, is how big, how large of a footprint Sharia has in the state of Texas. And I wanted to talk about this and invite you on just to go over some of these numbers and why it's so critical that Texans in particular recognize the threat that Sharia law poses to the Constitution of the United States.
Absolutely. There are some 300 mosques across Texas. They're popping up regularly. You don't notice them until there's some demonstration, like there has been recently in Irving, where a large group of Muslim people come out and they demonstrate. It's not yet to the point that we see in New York City, where they took over Times Square, or Dearborn, Michigan, but we're seeing a number of locations, and we're hearing reports that are very troubling. Reports of Sharia law being implemented. They're silenced in a lot of cases, but reports of child marriages, reports of a lot of things that are contrary to our laws and certainly contrary to biblical truth. And we see them happening, with increasing numbers of people. And then you'll see interviews. I was looking this morning and on my X account and saw interviews with people who say, I don't support America, I support, and they would list their home country, Somalia or whatever home country. If you were called to fight for America, would you do it? Absolutely not. These are not people who've assimilated into the American culture. They're certainly not adopted Christianity, and it is troubling.
Yes. Now, I want to, so Jenna's not here this morning to speak on this issue, but I'll just say this, and I know Jenna, her heart behind her support of obviously the Constitution, the First Amendment. When we're talking about religious liberty, we need to recognize that there are limits to that. And when I say limits, I don't mean that there are limits to American freedom, to freely exercise your faith publicly. But what I'm talking about is limits within worldview and ideology, that some are simply worldview, some ideology, some religions are wholly incompatible with the Constitution, because to practice some particular religions fully and completely would mean to take away rights of citizens. Let me give you an example. This is something that William Carey, this was a British missionary. He went to India back in the 1700s. He came to India. He wanted to bring the gospel there. One of the first things that he recognized was the practice of sati. And sati was the burning of widows in a ritual by fire. Widows were considered property in the Hindu religion. William Carey dared to impose British religion and British common law upon the Hindu people in India. And they basically outlawed the practice of sati, which basically said, you can't do this. I don't care if it's a part of your religion or your faith. You cannot conduct human sacrifice. We stand in that long tradition. Our Bill of Rights in the United States also come from England in 1688, the Glorious Revolution. 1776 picks up right off on that. In the United States, Sharia law is incompatible with the Constitution. And I want to be very, very clear. This is not a religious liberty question. This is about the constitutionality of practicing a religion that is not compatible with the American system at all.
Yeah, I want to add to that. Sharia is not a religion. Sharia is a code of conduct. It's a set of laws. They run contrary to the United States Constitution and the practical laws. For example, under Sharia, you can sell your daughter to another family. She could be 6, 8, 9 years old, purchased by another family, and then become a bride. Well, we don't believe in that here in America, and that's not something we condone. That's not a religious thought. That is literally a legal code. Under Sharia, if your neighbor leaves Islam and he was Muslim, then you have the right to kill them wherever they stand. Well, that's contrary to what we believe. We believe, in fact, it's contrary to the global belief. The United Nations has code on whether or not it's acceptable to leave a religion. And if a Christian wants to leave, what it says in the Bible is, you let them depart. The point is that we believe in freedom of conscience and individual liberties, and Sharia is not built on the concept of individual liberties. It's built on the ideology of conquest. And so, yes, it's not a religious question here. You can worship God in America however you'd like, as long as you're not infringing on the rights of others. And you also can't take advantage of others. There were times where various religions had the idea of having more than one wife, as is allowed under Sharia. Well, in the United States, we said we don't do that. And marriage was historically between one man and one woman. I suppose now under court rulings it's two persons, but we don't have 3-person, 4-person, 5-person marriages. They're contrary to the traditions in the history of the United States. They're contrary to our laws. They're contrary to our culture.
And talk about this, because I think this is important, and most Americans may not understand this. I have many friends who live in Texas, and they're normie Texans. They're busy, just as we all are in life, and they're taking their kids to school, dropping them off. They're going to work. They're paying taxes. They're just not, they may be wholly unaware that this is happening right under their nose in the same community that they live in. And certainly, we don't want to have the accusation of being prejudiced or being bigoted towards our neighbor and towards people that live in our community that don't look like us. But these Sharia courts or these Sharia councils, there is a way in which they can sort of coexist, meaning that they set up these parallel institutions. They're running them. They don't have legal standing, but they are certainly policing and binding the consciences of their own people under these Sharia councils to live by their laws and by their rulings, even while they might be a resident of the state of Texas or a citizen of the state of Texas within the practice of Sharia. That is to say, within the Muslim community. They are making decisions regarding marriage, regarding family, regarding property, and people are none the wiser as to what's happening in that community.
No, that's true, but they're also making decisions regarding what you can wear. For example, East Wiley High School, which is just outside Dallas-Fort Worth area, they had Hijab Day, where they were celebrating. The principal has been photographed wearing a hijab, and they were passing out Islamic literature in the school, something that's prohibited for Christians in many cases. But here you can dress up and wear a hijab, and it is Islam literally means submission, and it is an opportunity for you to submit to Islam and the conquest history of Islam. I mean, we're not ignorant of what's happened around the world, including what's happening in London today. I was just with former Pakistani Brit who was a former Muslim who left the faith, and he was beaten nearly to death multiple times. He had to go to police protection. The church in England said, we won't accept converts because of the risk of threat of violence. This is the problem. It's not that the individual is bad. People are, as God has created them, well, regardless of the background, what country they come from or whatever, we're to love them, and we're to love all people. And we all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But in the case of the Muslim, if they're in a community, they're told to conquer the next community. And as a result, you see these continuing practices. They've happened in 600, 700, 800 AD, all the way up until 10 years ago in England, 5 years ago in Dearborn, Michigan, and happening in Texas now. And you see the pattern. You literally force someone to join into Islam, or you encourage them, or they join, and then they start to follow the Sharia code. And the Sharia code requires you dress a certain way, you eat certain things. Well, that's fine if you individually choose that. It's when you choose to force that on your neighbor. For example, Houston, we had an imam going around pushing that you can't sell pork, you can't sell alcohol in certain stores because Muslims now live there, and so you must stop that practice. And he was saying, we'll be back in 6 months to see if you've done it, and there are consequences if you haven't.
Wow. Take us home on this. We got about another minute real quick. So this is coming up on Tuesday. Texans are going to be going to the polling stations all throughout the state. What do they need to look for? And then tell us real quick about Takia.
At the very bottom of the ballot on the Texas Republican primary ballot, Proposition 10 says Texas should prohibit Sharia law. It's not banning any individual. It's not banning Islam. It is literally prohibiting Sharia law as contrast to the Constitution and Texas and American law. Takia, you asked about, is you need to lie for the purpose of advancing Sharia. It's permissible to lie for someone that's following Sharia, to lie to advance the cause of Sharia.
Thank you, Kevin, so much. Very important issue, folks. I hope you are voting. We'll be right back after this break.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad, real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
They're coming for your family. Not with guns, not with armies, but with laws, with lawsuits, with ballots and bureaucrats. Parental rights are under attack. Marriage is being redefined. Your values, they want them silenced, and they're counting on you to do nothing. But here's the thing, we're not backing down. I'm Walker Wildman, and AFA Action is in the fight, in the legislature, in the courtroom, and at the ballot box. We're stopping bad legislation, we're challenging activist judges, and through iVoter Guide, we're helping Christians vote like it matters, because it does. Thousands of families are already standing with us, and I believe the American family is still worth fighting for. But we can't do it without you, and we need your help today. Visit afaaction.net right now. Give today. Join us on the front lines, because the other side isn't slowing down, and neither can we. afaaction.net. Your voice, your values, your vote.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. A shocking number of doctors, nurses, and others in the medical profession are posting online messages threatening to injure conservatives. And in many cases, they're hoping conservatives suffer violent injuries. A labor and delivery nurse at Baptist Health Boca Raton in Florida posted a video hoping Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt suffers medical complications during childbirth. In New York City, a pair of detectives were manhandled and denied treatment at NYC Langone Hospital in the Cobble Hill section of Brooklyn. The medical team thought the detectives worked for ICE. The hospital apologized, but former Mayor Eric Adams said it was a total moral collapse, and apologies are simply not good enough. Those working in hospitals swear an oath to care for their patients. Clearly, that oath has been violated. And now we have to wonder just how many patients were either denied treatment or given inadequate treatment simply because of their conservative political beliefs. I'm Todd Stearns.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
And welcome back. This is Ryan Helfenbein. I'm Vice President of Communications and Public Engagement at Liberty University, also the founding Executive Director of the Standing for Freedom Center. And in this next segment, I'm actually thrilled to introduce some special guests living in South Florida who are actually reaching their community outside the walls of their church. And when you think about basically the 250th anniversary, the celebration of the birth of our nation, what an opportunity it is for gospel impact, for reaching your community for Christ, and also recognize that much of this, what we're called to do as a church, is to go out of the four walls of our church and to reach into our community. And I want to introduce or welcome onto the program Scott and Jennifer Stonebreaker. Good morning, guys. Welcome to Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Good morning, Ryan. Thank you for having us.
Good morning.
Good morning. So real quick, this is exciting. You guys are hosting an event in South Florida. You guys have been doing this, it's a couple of years now, called Worship on the Rock. And this is basically an outreach that you're doing to Naples, Marco Island, to the South Florida region. Tell us a little bit about this and what caused you to do this in the beginning? What was the impetus behind this? What was the inspiration? Jennifer, you go first.
Well, I had this inspiration, Scott and I, to show the community what it looked like to worship God in a public square. If you don't go to church and you don't know the Lord, you wouldn't really understand what that looks like. So we thought, how could that impact our community if they were to see what worshiping God looked like? So it came together in 2023 where we kicked off our first Worship on the Rock. And it was interesting because it was during COVID when we had all of these crazy social issues going on. And I think everybody was looking at the church. What kind of voice would the church have on some of these issues? So in addition to the worship piece, we felt like it was really important to bring speakers in that could engage the church and talk about what our role is as believers when it comes to some of these social issues. How do we stand on the Word of God? What is the biblical worldview on this? So that's kind of how it all took shape. And this is our third year. The event is growing. We're expecting over 3,000 people this year. And we're super excited. It's going to be, it's coming up. It's a week away, March 7th. And it's at Veterans Community Park on Marco Island. If we have any Florida friends out there, we have Tasha Layton and Vertical Worship joining us this year. We've got food trucks and kids activities and fun giveaways. We're going to share the gospel. We give away free Bibles. We have local organizations that share a biblical worldview and promote biblical principles that are coming. We provide tents for them, and they're going to engage with the community and just share a little bit about what they're doing. And we're hoping that creates service opportunities for the church, so that they can
awesome.
Really dig in and get their hands dirty serving and doing things with organizations that are promoting a biblical worldview.
That's amazing.
Have three amazing speakers.
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick too, because you've got I see LifeWise Academy and Moms for Liberty. Of course, Liberty University is a partner in this as well. But depending on where folks are all throughout the country who might be listening, you might be inspired to do something for your community. And that's one of those things that I just want to drive home this morning is that oftentimes we look at the ministry of the local church. There's no, in many cases, no deficiencies there, but you can't wait on your pastors sometimes to do things that maybe the Lord is calling you to do. And so that's what I really want to key in on even this morning, Jen, as you kind of explain the programming and what you're putting together, because I think that others might be inspired to do the same. I do like the fact that this all started, as you say, during sort of the tail end of COVID-19 and the COVID lockdowns. And I think a lot of people were at that particular moment. Maybe they were bereft of having all the answers and trying to think through with the morality, the ethics of, do we obey all of these various lockdown orders? They're telling us to get the jab or we're going to lose our job. All of that stuff was happening around that time. And citizens many of them were standing up and speaking the truth to power, but speaking the truth in love. So I wanted you to continue. What else is happening in this program?
Yeah, so I can pick up on that. So we have a couple of great speakers, including yourself, who's going to be interviewing Bill Federer and Alan West. So Bill Federer is going to take us back to our heritage, how we got here, because as you know, Ryan, if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And yes. Alan West is going to bring the courage. He'll be talking about how to preserve our liberties. How do we protect liberty for another 250 years? And we've got a great video that is going to be a tribute to Charlie Kirk. And hopefully Alan isn't listening because he doesn't know it, but he's going to get the Charlie Kirk Courage for My Faith Award. And so that'll be a special moment. And, you know, this event really also helps unify the church, because how often are we worshiping with other people that go to other churches? And, you know, Jesus told us that you're the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. So salt preserves, light reveals, but both require presence. So our presence in the public square is what we're working toward promoting.
Amen. And I think one of the things that we've experienced over these past several decades is so much retreat from Christians who are largely absent from the public arena, that are kind of pulling away as things get darker, as there is more confrontation and more hostility. I've heard many people refer to the times we're living in post-Obergefell, that decision coming in 2013, that we are living in what is called the negative world, where Christianity is sort of seen as a hostile threat to the present age. So we don't retreat from that. We lean into it. We go into the public square. We go into the fray. And of course, Charlie Kirk, man, what a better example. There's not one in this present age. He's kind of, I've heard our friend, I knew Charlie well, but Charlie is like a modern Jim Elliot. You know, he didn't go to Ecuador to lose his life for the gospel. He went to the modern American public university, and that's where it happened. But that was the place where you get death threats. It still is. It's one of the most unsafe places in the United States, is a modern American public university. So tell us, I mean, just for folks who might be in the area or within a day's drive or half a day's drive, where can they find information about this event?
Well, they can go to worshipontherock.com. There's an FAQ section that'll tell you everything you need to know. This is the fun part. It's at a beautiful park on Marco with an amphitheater. It's outdoor. It's on the lawn. It's kind of like a good old American concert, worship concert, where you'll bring your own lawn chairs and a cooler, and certainly you can grab food at the food trucks. But it's located at 901 Park Avenue on Marco Island. So we'd be thrilled if anybody's listening made the drive over.
Well, I'll just say this. Spring break is on the way. For some people, they might even be celebrating or going on a family vacation. And if they're in the area in South Florida, that is an incredible place to stop. It's one of the most beautiful localities in the United States, and it's a summer destination for many. Certainly a spring destination for many, but not hard to get to if you live in Florida or if you've been living nearby neighboring states. Look, we've got a few more minutes, and so I do want to talk about this. This is about really just reaching the next generation and recognizing that the times that we're living in, I'm thinking of the sons of Issachar from the Old Testament. Scott, you've got a project that you've been working on, and this is in this area of being able to inform Christians on how to think biblically, encountering sort of the spirit of the age, but with wisdom, with prudence, with bold action. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the sons of Issachar knew the times and how to act, right? So we are called to know the times. And biblically speaking, Jeremiah talks about seeking the welfare of your city. And in its welfare, you'll find your welfare. So when we engage in the public square, we bring truth with humility, and we love our neighbors, and we try to encourage them to, like Charlie would always say, if you get them flowing in the streams of liberty, that's the source is Jesus.
Yes. Amen. I had this discussion, this was years ago, the passage right out of Jeremiah 29. And that's the passage you quote. It's really the promise that was given to Jeremiah. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. Many Christians have memorized that passage. It's appropriate that we do so. We know that God has a wonderful plan for our life. I think about the echo verse of that is in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. For he works all things together for the good of those who know him, who love him, and who are called according to his purpose. And so there's two conditions there. The beginning of Jeremiah 29, however, which these are people living in exile, the people of God. They don't really have a country, but God is saying, hey, I ain't going to bring you home. You're going to stay here, and I'm going to root you here. You need to plant, you need to build. You need to recognize that where I've called you, you're going to be a blessing. And you're going to be a blessing to people who don't know God. And you are going to be a reflection ultimately of your God to a foreign people. And so this is the way in which God is calling upon his people to be salt and light, exactly as you said earlier, to a people who don't know him. And I can't help but think 250 years, Scott and Jen, we have been founded as a nation. Our forebears were Christian. We have a legal framework, a moral framework, a spiritual framework for this country. But many Americans today simply do not understand our founding, and they don't understand the nation that they live in. And so here, many Christians are living in these present times as strangers in the country that their forebears started. So how would you encourage, I think there's many listeners today, not to retreat, not to be afraid, but to lean in and to step in with courage, with conviction, and with clarity in this moment?
Yeah, that's right. Courage begets courage. So it's very interesting. When the first one we did, we had a pastor come up to us from a different church, and he said, I thought about doing this, but I never thought that it would be this successful and this many people would show up. And so I think we're just encouraging others to do the same and put themselves out there, bring their faith into the public square, because that's what we're called to do.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think it has to be a big thing. We can all do a part. We're all called to something. And that might be just starting maybe a Bible study or a biblical citizenship class. I think it's Patriot Academy that has that amazing biblical citizenship class. So it doesn't have to be some grand event. We can all just start small in our own communities. But I think that's where the real change happens, when we dig in to our own communities.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I'll tell you something my church is doing. My church is Thomas Road Baptist Church here in Lynchburg, Virginia. And yes, it's the 250th anniversary of our nation. It's also the 70th anniversary of Thomas Road. It was started in 1956 by Dr. Jerry Falwell. And one of the things he wanted to do is reach Lynchburg for Jesus. And this year, what we're doing is a campaign to basically spread this entire community with the Bible. And so we're bringing the Bible to every single doorstep in Lynchburg, going and knocking on doors. Very simple, just the message of the gospel. Jesus saves sinners. Jesus loves you. And you might not be a member of the local church. You're welcome to come and worship at Thomas Road and to hear the gospel. Or you might be a member of another church in the community. God bless you in that. We just want to encourage you and pray for you. But, this is one of those things. The gospel doesn't happen by accident. Faith comes by hearing by the word of God.
Amen. That's really beautiful that they're doing that. I love it.
Well, I want to, as we close out, just maybe in the final minute, give us one, maybe a life verse, Scott and Jen, that you guys are living by. Maybe it's the theme of this very event. Give us some a passage from Scripture that you've devoted to memory and it means a lot to you.
I would say Proverbs 31:9, open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy.
Very good. And so in this moment, and I think this is important, that we speak righteously to what's happening in our country. I really appreciate so much you guys coming on, sharing your story. And folks, you might be listening. It doesn't matter where you are. You might be in Texas, Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia, wherever you are, Pennsylvania, Ohio. Recognize that God has called you. Have a Jerusalem that God has called you to, and He's called you to reach that community for Christ.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Every weekday, strengthen your family and your faith with Family Talk.
I had the same brain when I was at the bottom of the class that I had at the top of the class. Exactly the same brain, but a different attitude. What does that tell us about our responsibility to develop the intellect of the people in our spheres of influence?
Don't miss Family Talk with Dr. James Dobson every weekday at 6:30 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. Central on AFR.
From whom the whole body, fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplieth. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. It's not by chance that Jesus refers to his church as the body. Just as it is with our physical bodies, every member has a distinct role and function to fulfill. Unfortunately, in this era of celebrity Christianity, we've reduced the concept of ministry solely to what occurs in what is often little more than Sunday productions and performances. The key to thriving in God's kingdom is understanding that every member in the body of Christ is vital and is called to ministry.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
How about this? Some actual good news on the healthcare front, even as costs just keep skyrocketing. So if you're 65 or older, MediShare now offers MediShare 65 Plus. call them. You can talk to them about this. A lot of people are taking advantage of this now because even if you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are out-of-pocket things, deductibles and co-pays that just keep going up. And the whole point is to help you by giving you a low, consistent monthly payment that fills in the gaps. In fact, I can tell you how much Medishare 65 Plus is. For example, it's $99 a month up to age 75. It keeps costs under control. That helps with peace of mind. Medishare is trusted too. It's been around for 30 years, and it's a community of people who help each other. Business owners, retirees, pastors, teachers. People love being part of it. Here's the number you can call now. They are easy to talk to. Call 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning. I'm Ryan Helfenbein, Vice President of Communications at Liberty University, and of course, the founding executive director of the Standing for Freedom Center. And man, what a week we've had. And I want to go back to some of the highlights of the State of the Union on Tuesday evening. Many of you watched. Many viewers are looking back at the State of the Union and saying one of the most historic speeches in American history in the last 60 years. You cannot find a speech longer. I think the total runtime was about an hour and 48 minutes. And many people, including critics of the president, say, look, our president was being very strategic in this speech. And there are a lot of things that he was decisive on in terms of the things that he mentioned on immigration policy and affordability, on economics, on national security. And we need to recognize that in many ways, this will be the roadmap to the 2026 midterms. I'm inviting back into the conversation Grant May. He is a researcher over at the Standing for Freedom Center. Grant, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Ryan. Thank you for having me back.
Well, I want to talk a little bit of one of the things that I want to focus in on is certain areas that I think that are a win for the president that actually tend positive. And it's fascinating if you were to listen to, say, Ross Douthat at the New York Times and other folks. They want the president to chill on immigration, to sort of take a back seat. That immigration, for those that are living in the deep, deep blue pockets of the United States, Douthat is rather uncomfortable with how this policy has been handled by the president, and he's urging caution. He caucuses as a Republican. He's somebody who has, at least at the polls, has voted for the president, but he works in the New York Times, and some of these guys are uneasy when it comes to this issue. You are youngest generation, you're Gen Z, the youngest generation that is voting right now. Let me be clear, not Gen Alpha, but Gen Z that is actually the voting age. How did you see that speech from Tuesday night?
I mean, once again, the speech was a masterclass. And I think it's important to recognize that immigration has always been central to now President Trump's his platform. You rewind back to 2015 when he came down that escalator at Trump Tower. What was central to his campaign? What did he make the issue? It was the fact that we have millions of illegal immigrants in our country who don't belong here, and that we need to secure our southern border. Well, part two of that has been done. Trump has done a phenomenal job. We have had, I believe the numbers came out that we didn't have a single border crossing, illegal border crossing so far in 2026. But the other part needs to be grappled with. We have been invaded. There is lots of just consequences everywhere you look around it, whether that be electorally, politically, socially. There are mass consequences to the current status quo of our immigration system, and that's what got President Trump elected. And so I love that he's doubling down. He doesn't need to listen to people who live in these deep blue cities, because ultimately this is what motivated his base to look to a New York Democrat to help make America great again.
There are 36 states in the United States that have some kind of voter ID law and a mechanism for enforcement. There are 14 states that do not. Spoiler alert, those are the states that Kamala Harris actually ended up winning and carrying, with the exception of maybe Pennsylvania. But pretty much every state that has no voter ID law, has no mechanism of enforcement, goes heavy, indexes heavy Democratic. And so, yes, you've got the problem of mass illegal immigration. You've got millions of people you have that live here, that have come here, that have lived here, and that are finding ways to get an ID. Many of them to drive a vehicle, and then to go and vote and to register to vote on election day. Many of them, no registration is even required. You go to the state of California, you can fill out a ballot, you can drop that ballot at a ballot box, and there's no real chain of custody of verification or proof of identification or national origin. That is theft. That is stealing. And in many ways, and I'll add to it, it is a legalized category of theft, because those election officials within that state are not enforcing the national standard, and that is that you must be a citizen of the United States. Take just common sense here. Why is it so important when we think about 50 million folks living in the United States, foreign born? So at some point in their lifetime, they made the journey to the United States, and now they live here. Why is it so important, though, that we have voter ID, Grant?
Well, I mean, you just have to look at, why are the Democrats so beholden to avoiding having a voter ID? Look, the fact of the matter is, this is their base, who they are beholden to protecting, whether that be in the census and how we distribute congressional seats, because they count illegal voters there, so that they have proportionally higher representation. And then they want to use excuses like, oh, it's hard to get an ID. We don't want to prevent people from voting that should be voting. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you can't obtain an ID, you really shouldn't be voting in the first place. If you're not smart enough to get an ID, what makes them think that you should be smart enough to decide the future direction of this country? They are so passionate about this issue, though, because they are beholden to a base that maybe shouldn't be voting in the first place. And so I think it is imperative that we secure our American elections. We got to make sure that it is only citizens voting, and we got to make sure those citizens are also informed voters. The voting wasn't always universal in America. It wasn't until Andrew Jackson that all free people got the right to vote, all free men. And then we've just expanded it gradually from there. But the idea that voter ID, requiring somebody to show an ID to vote, that it disenfranchises people, is a ridiculous contention. The only people it actually disenfranchises is the people that shouldn't be voting in the first place.
Talk a little bit about this, because I think this is important, and this impacts the youngest generation of voting age as well. And that is the issue of affordability. And so I know that, the president has done multiple things on the area of housing. Certainly, he's trying to keep inflation low. I want to be clear. I'm not an economist, but I'm an economics major, and I understand basic things like, if you run continuous deficits, you're going to continue to have inflation, because they have to print more money. The Federal Reserve Bank is going to print more money to cover those deficits. But talk a little bit about how important affordability is when it comes to everyday Americans.
Yeah, I mean, affordability is really everything. You look, if the economy is doing well, 9 out of 10 times a president is going to do well as far as his approval rating. The thing is, with Trump, he's constantly beating this drum that everything's so affordable, and prices have gone down, and that's a huge blessing. But until young Americans really feel the impacts of this, you can say it all day long, but it won't move the needle at all. I think Trump has done a good job so far, but I would love to see more results. I mean, it's sad. My generation has inherited a totally different country than the generation that my grandparents grew up in. The whole idea of you can just get the factory job, buy the starter house, and raise kids there your whole life, then buy a second vacation home has largely just become a pipe dream for many of us. You look at how wages have increased over time rather gradually versus the prices of houses has just exponentially exploded. I think Trump is right that we need to do something about affordability, and he's looking for solutions. And I think we got to have a little bit of patience and wait for those to bear out. But he's doing the right things. For my grandparents, for my kids to have the same sort of youth experience that my grandparents did, they have to belong to a country club today. They have to pay to belong to a country club just to have the average American coming of age experience that my grandparents did. And I think that's really sad. And there's lots of factors that contribute to it. But one of those is the economy. It is affordability. And then it's also this mass migration that we keep coming back to. And I think those are the two biggest factors that are motivating youth voters.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a film that I used to love as a kid, and that's the movie The Sandlot. And The Sandlot is just classic Americana, 1960s, growing up in the suburbs of anywhere USA, literally anywhere USA. And it's the idea that your kids in the neighborhood could get on a bicycle, ride out until dark, until sunset, play baseball at some public park, go to the public swimming pool, right? The boy meets girl kind of phenomena as well, of just being young kids and enjoying this great nation that we live in. And there's so many things in that movie that communicate what it used to be like living in the United States of America. I got to enjoy part of that as a kid and never calling safety into question. We used to play hide and go seek and tag in our neighborhood until well after dark. And I remember that was just a normal thing for all of us. And we never thought about that. And then my parents' generation, they grew up in a community where people literally just didn't lock their doors. And that doesn't mean that people didn't have responsible gun ownership or other kinds of security and safety mechanisms. But at the end of the day, it was neighbor trusting neighbor. Everybody knew each other in the neighborhood. So stuff goes hand in hand, though, does it not, Grant? When you think about affordability, you think about mass immigration, and you think about voter ID, it all goes together, all of it. And part of the housing issue is because mass illegal immigration.
It all goes together. You're spot on there. And I think this whole theme, you love The Sandlot. I also love The Sandlot. But The Sandlot has a radicalizing impact on me because I will never know that America. But the same themes are all throughout those somewhat older movies and TV shows. I mean, you could take Leave It to Beaver. You could take the Andy Griffith Show. All of these movies are centered around a high-trust society that was once American society that no longer exists. And young people are asking questions of, how do we get back what was stolen from us? This was our birthright, and we're looking for solutions. And the first person, the first political party to be able to provide those solutions is going to win the future, and I really hope it's the Republican Party.
Yes, and so there are two visions here, two rival visions. One is of grievance, and the other one is of gratitude. The one is, the only way to do it is to steal what somebody else has and give it to somebody who's less fortunate, versus the way of gratitude is that if we could make these conditions such that there is actual justice, that we punish evil, we promote righteousness, that that those who exercise lawlessness, those who would prey upon the innocent, those that would seek to, by theft, steal what is not theirs, they must meet a just consequence and a just end. There needs to be a way in which the law comes crashing down on people like that. And at the same time, that the government does not interfere with people who are otherwise righteous. One of the things that I cannot stand, Grant, is when I'm on a motorist on a highway and I see otherwise law-abiding citizens who are being maybe harassed by law enforcement, and I think, hey, go police a rough neighborhood, please. Like, these guys they're just trying to get to work. They're just trying to get to school. Right. Can we settle down on going after otherwise law-abiding citizens?
Right. Well, and this is, like you articulated perfectly, the Christian view of government. We are commanded to desire the state, to crush evil, to be an avenger of God's wrath who doesn't bear the sword in vain. And then when you get sidetracked with all these petty side crimes, they're prevented from doing their primary duty. I think now that we live in such a nanny state, I mean, my little brother got pulled over or he got a ticket, not even from being pulled over. He got mailed a ticket in the mail from a camera that caught him going, I think it was 7 miles per hour over the speed limit, and they mailed him a ticket for $100. And this is the sort of nanny state that we live in, where, you know, the murderer of Irina Zarutsky gets let off after 14 prior arrests, and then we're going to mail our citizens, who are otherwise law-abiding citizens, tickets for going over the speed limit. It's a misallocation of resources. It's a misunderstanding of what your primary duty and function is as the civil magistrate. And we as Christians have to get smarter about thinking about these roles.
That is so well said. Grant, you are the next generation. And I think it's so important as listeners, as you're listening even now. Grant is a graduate of Liberty University, but he's the next generation, and the generation that is going to be in leadership one day soon. And it is so important that we defend the freedoms that we have been given. And so this year is a year of celebration. It is also a year of rededication. And so I hope that as you're listening, you rededicate yourself to the same freedom. God bless you all. Thank you for listening.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.